protected and made available for use by the community. The lands, small AED, should provide access to water for everyone. Where this has been done in other cities, those lands have become an important access point for citizens. And for a little signage and a little bit of maintenance, it's a great benefit and occur. And the other thing I want to speak to is, you've heard a lot of discussion about the SMP and the comp plan and schedules. And I'm one of those that agrees with Monday's speaker who said that you need to put the comp plan off until the SMP is complete. There's a lot of things in the SMP that are not secure and not solid that the comp plan depends on. And we've been working on the SMP for what, 3 years? And to think that the comp plan can be completed in the next 3 months doesn't make sense to me, especially since you're going to have a lot of things from the SMP that your comp plan is going to depend on. I think you really seriously need to look at postponing, finalizing, and changing your calendar.
Any questions for Mr. Alshu? Thank you, Rob.
You bet.
Next person I have is Dean Shukarath. Mr. Shukarath. Next person I have is Steve Hodes.
Hi there, my name is Steve Hodes. I live at 3136 Marengo Southeast. I'll be brief, I'm here to oppose the part of the urban corridor designation of parts of the Governor Stevens Carline neighborhood. You heard a little bit about that on Monday. I'm glad to hear earlier speakers say that our neighborhood is not low-hanging fruit. That is a kind of relief. As I wrote today in my earlier email comments on the plan, on the draft plan, the neighborhood is a neighborhood of single-family homes, many dating to the 30s and before. There's virtually no multifamily dwellings in the neighborhood. The neighborhood, other than open space, is currently 3 to 5 units an acre, and the area is zoned at, I don't know, 4 or 5 an acre. I'm not sure, maybe a little higher. I do appreciate that the changes to the clarification that was added in the latest draft of the plan that says the neighborhood designation should be, density target should be 7 plus units rather than 15 plus units. That's very helpful. But I urge maintenance of the current density in the area, 4 to 7 units an acre. Thanks very much. If there's any questions, that answer.
Any questions, Commissioners, of Mr. Hodes? Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Darrell.
What did you have, Commissioner?
The question is actually more to either Todd or Amy to clarify for the people who are testifying, who mentioned that they submitted a previous comment on the April plan, to clarify if they need to resubmit that at this time so it will be on the record.
All of the previous comments are online and they are part of the overall comprehensive plan update record, so they don't have to resubmit them, except the difference is that tonight's your opportunity to comment on the current draft, which may be a little bit different than the previous draft or, you know, early in the process.
So I'll try to resubmit so that I can deal with the update that you made in this last draft. Thanks very much.
That would be helpful. Thank you, Steve. Next, I've got a panel of 2 persons, so that's Kathleen Bird and Bethany Whitener. And you got a 10-minute allocation for 2 persons. Go ahead. Most comfortable.
I appreciate the opportunity to share my comments this evening. Thank you all for
Let's pull that
listening
mic up just a little bit more.
to such a divergent number of people and different viewpoints. I'm here with Bethany to talk about the 16th Street and Decatur Street connections in the Southwest Olympia neighborhood. Oh yeah, I'm Kathleen Bird of the Southwest Olympia Neighborhood Association. I live at 132 Plymouth Street Northwest, but I'm a member of the Southwest Neighborhood Association because I live south And I've been involved with the neighborhood association for 12 years. I'm a bicycle commuter, and I ride my bike year-round from the neighborhood to South Peterson Community College. That bike path at Decatur is arguably the only safe route from the neighborhood to Black Lake and SBSCC. So I'm very interested in protecting that bike path. Bethany handed you 2 documents. The first one is called Decatur Dialogues, and that's a compilation of emails and letters that have been sent by Northwest and for Southwest Olympia residents in opposition to opening Decatur Street or 16th Street. As you can see on the map on the page, there's this bike path on Decatur that the Sustainability Committee at SBSCC along with the neighborhood sponsored a bike day 2 years ago. So there are many commuters from SBSCC who use that bike path regularly. I'd like to focus my comments actually though on the transportation section of the comprehensive plan and specifically to the draft plan's connectivity policy. So there's some very specific language that's being proposed as a change that has a drastic impact on the potential for neighborhood involvement in any decision-making around opening either of these streets. So if you look at this document, we have the current language of the comprehensive plan that has, for example, language such as, to determine when a new connection should be made to existing streets, the city will determine whether the merits outweigh the demerits of the whole package. In the draft plan, the language is pursue all street connections. This is a new policy. This analysis will occur at the development review level if a connection is opposed. Instead of the current practice of proving the need for a proposed connection, the assumption is all street connections are needed. This evaluation will be used to describe why a proposed connection is not considered valuable to the street network and requires the opponent to make the case against the connection. My read on this, in this case, is that the neighborhood is viewed as an opponent. So the people living, residing, using the neighborhood for biking and walking are the ones who have to bear the burden of proving that the connection is not a good one and not a valuable one. So this is pretty drastic change in policy language that's being proposed in the July draft. And it raises my concerns, and I think it's counter to the goals of public participation and counter also to the larger vision of the transportation section of the plan, which is to promote walkability and biking. The criteria for what must be analyzed is also drastically different from the current plan and July draft plan. For example, the first 2 criteria in the current plan are that the city will take into account 1, neighborhood development plans, 2, pedestrian safety. In the July draft plan, the first 2 criteria are, 1, it will analyze the opponent, in this case, not the city, impacts on directness of travel for pedestrians, bicyclists, transit users, and motorists. And the second one is impacts on directness of travel for emergency public and commercial service vehicles. So both of these criteria relate to directness of travel. This is really about convenience for cars, not about bicyclists and walkers. So street connections are about connecting streets for cars. There's already a bike pathway there that many people use to move from the neighborhood to both places of work and commercial and recreational uses. So my concern is really this aspect of policy change in addition to the very specific street connections, because I think this has to do with any neighborhood, any existing neighborhood that wants to be part of the decision-making process around street connection is going to be facing the same policy.
My name is Bethany Blackman.
and I live at 1415 6th Avenue Southwest. I'm a past president of the Southwest Side Neighborhood Association. Brad O'Brien is the current president, could not be here tonight. I do want to encourage you to read through the Decatur dialogues. They're actually sort of fun and interesting. I don't know, you can put them by the breakfast table or something. Generally, they reflect the view of the bulk of the neighborhood that opening 16th and Decatur to Highway 101 was basically an off-ramp that flowed traffic through the neighborhood to the mall, to other places, to avoid the congestion on Black Lake Boulevard and Cooper Point Road, amongst other places. It's a feeling that is generally shared that the two connection possibilities should actually remain closed, even though what I'm going to talk about isn't focused on the notion of having them remain closed. I just want to also reiterate what Kathleen said about the policy in the draft comprehensive plan, which is in the July draft. You'll see the language from, in the middle column, you'll see the language from the July draft. And on the right-hand column, we have developed a group of neighborhood residents, suggested language that we would like you to instruct the staff to replace, to substitute for the language in the draft plan. I won't read through that because my focus is on the Decatur and 16th Street language itself, but it is a sea change from the current policy. It effectively shifts the burden of proof to someone who disagrees with the connection, even in an established neighborhood. And I did speak with Dave Riker at the beginning, and he told me that there was no intent to prevent an established neighborhood from being able to participate in the decision. So if that's the case, then changes need to be made in the language. As it is, it shifts the burden of proof from innocent until proven guilty to guilty, and gives you a little window to prove you're innocent. So what I would like to focus on is on page 2 of your side-by-side comparison. Those lay out a description of the Decatur Street connection. One is from the current comprehensive plan, the middle one is from the July draft, and the right-hand side, again, represents our requested new language. And in the draft, the language contains a lot of unsupported assertions that support a favorable view of opening Decatur. And if you look at that, the draft plan language in the middle, it says, any decision on whether to connect Decatur Street to Caton Way and open 16th Avenue as a vehicular connection will not be made until the West Olympia Access Study Phase 2 is complete. That's the dispositive statement, really, about Decatur and 16th Street. But this description includes a lot of things that are in dispute, are assertions unsupported. For example, if you look at the third page, it says, a system of traffic calming devices has been installed. These devices should be effective in reducing the volume of through traffic from outside the immediate neighborhood. Well, that's not necessary for a connection whose, where the decision is not to be made until new information comes in. Another problem with the draft language is that, if you can see on the left-hand side in the current comp plan, for some reason the staff deleted the only information that suggested that in the area of the neighborhood, traffic increases associated with opening these two connections would be incompatible with a residential environment. So they left in the
language of the current plan that favored opening or suggested that there wouldn't be impacts, and they deleted the language that indicated that there would be impact. So again, we feel like that's not necessary and raises some questions about what the intent of this provision is. Another statement that's disputed is the one that says the majority of users for this connection would be local. It's my understanding that's based on a staff presentation from 2001, which 11 years ago, before the burst of development on the west side, expansion of Capitol Mall, expansion of Capitol Medical Center, development of all those new residential subdivisions on Mud Bay. So that's arguably no longer true. In any case, why is it there? None of those assertions is necessary to present the Decatur and 16th Street issue, and we think they're not even appropriate. We've suggested other language which is accurate. If you look at the requested change column, a proposal to move forward on a new West Olympia access to State Route 101 by connecting the southwest neighborhood via connections at Decatur Street and 16th Avenue was rejected by the City Council in 2004. At that time, the council instructed the staff to create a bikeway connector. The next paragraph says, essentially, new vehicle access would allow residents of the neighborhood direct route 101, but it would also make an attractive opportunity for outside cars to use that to go to the mall, Capitol Medical Center, downtown. And if you look at your map at the beginning of the Decatur dialogues, you can see why opening 16th and opening Decatur represents a desirable alternative for bypassing the congestion on Cooper Point Road.
I'm going to have you wrap up your comments,
Okay.
if you could, just in case commissioners also have questions, Ms. Wagner, so.
And then the last paragraph of our suggested language is simply pointing out that the agreement that the connections will be considered until after the study. There is one other thing we'd like to ask you to take out, consistent with the same observations, and that is the listing of Decatur Street connection in Appendix B as a connection to be opened. It also exists in the EDS, the Engineering Design and Development Standards, which are being revised right now as a connection to be opened. And again, consistent with the council decision that it will not be considered until after the close of the study. We would like that to be taken out too, or we can deal with that.
Thank you. No, thank you very much. And again, there were two handouts this evening, so part of the record. Questions for Ms. Berger, Ms. Wagner, Commissioner Parker?
Your very last, excuse me, is the substance of your last oral comment reflected in any of the printed materials? And if not, can you provide that to us?
It's not reflected, and I do have a copy that describes it and tells where it is. So I'll let it know.
I think that could be provided to staff. That'd be great. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Next on the list is a panel of two persons, and again, a 10-minute time frame. Martin Callaway. Collmore, I'm sorry if I pronounced it wrong.
No, everybody pronounced it wrong.
I get that too with my names.
Chair, Commission, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come before you and make a couple of very short comments. One, I am not a planner. I'm not a official government bureaucrat. My background is in science. I've been a homeowner in the Carline, Governor Stevens area for 35 years. Raised 2 children, have a wonderful house, except for the helicopters going over all the time. And I applaud your willingness to entertain comments on this urban corridor issue. I think it has a lot of merit, but it does need to be talked about. My specific question is, I do not understand why that little section from I-5 going down Capitol Boulevard is supposed to affect my house directly, where there's no parking, it's all single residence. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me why that was even included. I can see the east-west aspect of this planning being fairly critical and important. That one little bit isn't really, wash. I did a little walk around today, which was kind of interesting. This is what I wanted to present. I have sent you an email before. My concern about it being a historical area, single residency, established neighborhood. I think that's probably been addressed by a number of people since Monday anyway. I did a little walk around, which was kind of interesting. In that area, there's probably three that I know of, maybe 4 or 5 houses, single resident houses for sale. That's it. You're not going to put in anything. There's no parking whatsoever on Capitol Boulevard. I mean, really. So I did, what I could to do a comparison. So I went down to the Cleveland, Custer, Capitol Boulevard area and counted up businesses. And this is not totally scientific by any stretch. If there's 5 businesses in one building, I counted it as one business. If there are 5 businesses that were vacant in one building, I called it one building. What I came through was what I suspected. This is, again, not totally scientific, but I totaled up about 43 businesses in that little triangular area there, from Sunset Life over to Pass Safeway, say. Out of those, 11 were vacant. So we're talking somewhere in the round number of 26% of that little Tumwater enclave along Capitol Boulevard, in that just little area, 26% are vacant. And why is Olympia wanting to imitate what Tumwater already has a problem with? It just escapes me why that would be included as an urban corridor. I may be missing something, and I probably am. We have bus service. We have sidewalks. What's that neighborhood going to gain? What can we lose? Probably the bigger issue.
Any questions, Commissioners, for Mr. Collingwood? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Steve Seagal. Steve?
This evening, my name is Steve Seagal, 3110 Bedford Drive, Northwest Olympia, 98502. I think the comprehensive plan is inextricably entwined with the waterfront and also therefore the SMP. I recognize that this is not an SMP period, but the vitality of Olympia is going to be dependent upon the central core, its downtown, and working its way out. When we're looking at a comprehensive plan, the health of the outer areas of the city is not going to be sustainable if the central allowed to. And,
Do you have a ballot drop off?
8 days ago, the council gave direction to city staff to proceed with acquisition of the Rita Passage properties in an expeditious manner. And also with the idea of ultimately obtaining the Capitol Center building State by the Lake. And one of the things the council brought up during the course of their comments during the last week's meeting was that this could be a central part of the city's redevelopment and vision for downtown. Any comprehensive plan needs to take that direction very seriously. This development is going to be essential to downtown. It's not going to happen unless you provide the city with tools in the form of the comprehensive plan. Because the SMP is due sooner and the town plan is not due until 2016, I think it's putting the cart before the horse a little bit to rush to get the comprehensive plan drafted by December prior to finalization of the SMP and submission of the SMP to the Department of Ecology. And ultimately, the state's Department of Ecology will approve the SMP or not, or modify. And I'm taken back a little bit by the court's position. They seem to be threatening litigation. They talk about their charter, or what they're required to do under state law in terms of economic development. They've talked about that the court is accountable for all of Thurston County taxpayer dollars and the impact and how essential they are to the economic development of the area. What's missing, and then they asked about industrial use for property on the Port Peninsula. They're concerned that view corridors would adversely impact their ability to function. The port is the farthest port from the ocean. It is dependent upon the exportation of logs. It is a 19th century industry where we are exporting our raw materials to industrialized countries to turn into finished products. That is not the economic model that we should incorporate into our comprehensive plan for Olympia's 21st century. The port's use of taxpayer dollars has been primarily to clean up an environment that's left over from the 19th and early part of the 20th century. Those industries have gone away. For the port to say we need appropriate comprehensive plan, an appropriate comprehensive plan for us to put additional industry into the Port Peninsula, so the port has other property throughout the county. If they're going to do industrial development, I would encourage the port to do it where there is land, it can be utilized, and it can be done efficiently. Right now, you have all the detriments of heavy log trucks tearing up your roads, noise, polluting the downtown. That's not the future of Olympia. SMP, the finality should be accomplished before proceeding with the finality to the comprehensive plan. It is not the city's job to define the board's mission in its comprehensive plan. I would ask the court, or ask the comprehensive plan, consider environmental stewardship, not just mitigation, but restoration, quality of life for its citizens, enabling the city to carry through a vision that will revitalize downtown, including use of community renewal act as appropriate, so that we can build on our strengths. We're not trying to reach back into the last century and repeat the same mistakes. And road impact fees should be reasonable measurement with the impact, and also land dedication should be an option whereby the developer can dedicate a certain amount of land because the costs associated are not always borne in full by the impact. The city is ultimately responsible for the roads, public safety, water, sewer, utilities, those sorts of things. Schools, parks, we have to be realistic in assessing those societal costs. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Segal. Any questions for Mr. Segal? Segal, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. I do have one, you triggered in my head when you said land dedication. Are you referring to transfer of development rights or purchase of development rights? They're both of different types, so.
Transfer of land as a portion so that the city can utilize it for neighborhood park or could be development as well. But whatever is accurately reflects the ultimate impact of the development. One other thing, I don't believe that the port pays no tax to the city. Well, I'm sure they're trying to point it out, but we want to have businesses to pay those taxes.
Thank you, and I know you've got some notes in front of you, so I didn't know if you were going to submit those to the commission as well. I see. So we appreciate those.
I will do that.
Thank you. Commissioner Moore?
I guess I'm still not understanding land dedication. Was that in place of impact fees? Was it the concept that you were putting forward?
It could be, it has to be something that's fair to both sides and accurately measures the true impact. You have to look at what's going to be the demand on city services, the school district, parks, and you have, in part, you have right now it's a monetary impact fee, but perhaps there's some middle ground. I'm not sure how you effectuate that legislatively, but it's something to consider.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Moore? Anything? Commissioner Parker, did you have your hand up? Okay. Any other commissioners? Thanks.
Thank you for your
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Barton.
You mentioned that it wasn't the city's job to define the port's role. Were you referring to the inclusion of that appendix? Is that what you were?
right. If that's where the city had given lip service to the importance of the port, I think the port can define its own missions to the city to do it for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next person I have down indicated they didn't want to speak, but I wanted to check in. Jan Bailey? Change your mind? Are you Jan? Yeah. Did you wish to testify? No. Okay, thank you for being here this evening. Next I've got T.J. Johnson. Mr. Johnson? Thank you, everybody, for being patient tonight.
Good evening, and for the record, T.J. Johnson, 319 Sawyer Street Northeast, Northia. Also the director of the local food system program at Sustainable South Sound, though I'm not speaking on behalf of that group tonight. I appreciate the fact that the comprehensive plan has a clear focus on realizing the vision of a sustainable city. I think that's good. I think that's been a weak point in our previous plan. However, it's really hard for me to conceive of a sustainable city if that city doesn't have a sustainable food system. And I think the language, to the extent it exists in the draft plan, is woefully inadequate to position us to really develop a robust urban agricultural program, policies, and healthy food system here in the city of Olympia. We, as humans, have three basic needs: food, water, and shelter. And I see a lot in the plan about water, and I see a lot about shelter. I see very little about food. You may not know this, but the average U.S. city has 3 days worth of food in reserve. So the saying goes that we're always 9 meals from anarchy. And I'd like to think that we as a community would be doing some proactive things through our planning to ensure that we're not 9 meals from anarchy. Don't like that idea. And in doing that, I think we'd be in step with cities all over this country that are changing their comprehensive plans and developing policies and programs and partnerships to encourage the production of food, the development of local food economies, the growing and selling of fresh, local, healthy food in their communities. People here in our community are clearly tuned into this over the last 2 years. Hundreds of people have turned out to Food Summit, various food-related events. 2 months ago, when we thought that we were still going to get an urban agriculture ordinance through the Planning Commission this year, we filled this room with 85 people who were here to talk about the importance of city leadership on development of policies and programs to create a local healthy food system. Some of what came out of that meeting was code changes. A lot of what came out of that meeting was big picture ideas and policies that are really much more suited for inclusion in the comprehensive plan as a means of setting the stage for subsequent work and subsequent development of programs and acquisition of resources in future years to realize that vision. So some of the areas I think we ought to be looking at in the comprehensive plan in this regard and addressing specific to urban agriculture and food system are in the area of education and ensuring that information and education is provided to the community about the importance of this food system. Clearly, elements around production, policies and statements that would encourage the development of home gardens, that would discourage more green grass, it could be food production areas, and also the incorporation of for-profit agricultural enterprises in the city, whether that's community gardens or sales from backyard gardens. We ought to be addressing issues of consumption and encouraging people, and there is a little bit in the plan now about encouraging healthy lifestyles. I think we could be doing a lot more about talking about the connection between diet and community well-being. We talk a lot about transportation choices and how they affect health and well-being, but I think we need to address the issue of diet. Economic development, the real thing that's driving cities' interests in urban agriculture all across this country is economic development. They see it as a means of bringing income into the community and keeping it in the community and not outsourcing jobs and outsourcing our food dollars to multinational corporations that frankly don't give a damn about it. And the other area I think that ought to be included in the plan is a commitment to regional leadership and regional collaboration. There's a lot going on right now around this through the spin-offs from last year's Food Summit, the creation of a local food system council, the food panel that's part of the Sustainable Thurston process, and I think Olympia should be positioning itself as a regional leader and partner in those efforts. So I think we need some clear visions in this plan too, and some of the visions that have been suggested in these public meetings, in particular the meeting back in May. One vision might be that everyone who lives in the city of Olympia is within walking or biking distance of a place to grow food. Real simple statement. Might be your backyard, might be a community garden in a city park, it might be a community garden on private property, but everyone should have that option. The second would be a commitment to restore the health of Puget Sound as a food production source. We talk a lot about restoring Puget Sound, but historically, Puget Sound was the primary food source for the people who lived in this region, and I think we need to be serious about making sure that that's an option again for the future. Another vision statement might be that by the year 2020, 20% of all the food consumed in the city of Olympia is produced within 20 miles of the city of Olympia. So really focusing on localizing and having some measurable benchmarks to help us determine our success of relocalizing our food system. And I don't need to go over all of the why we should do this. I think everybody is understands the fragility of the current industrial food system, and as we see the corn crops in Indiana, Iowa, withering in the heat, and we start to see the price spikes on everything from ethanol to pork to eggs, it should be really obvious why we ought to be in control of our own destiny when it comes to food, and that the importance of including that in our comprehensive plan really just can't be overlooked. We have an opportunity here, an opportunity that our sister cities in Lacey and Tumwater took last year. In their annual comp plan update process, they vastly expanded their support for urban agriculture. And frankly, our city is way behind the curve here, even in Thurston County, on encouraging our citizens to get engaged in that and creating supportive public policies to make it easy for them to do that. So I would ask you to really adopt some strong, clear language in the plan that would allow us to set a course for where we want to go in relocalizing our food system, revitalizing our economy, improving the health of our communities, building neighborhoods, and the kind of thing that a sustainable city really has to have.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Any questions, commissioners? Mr. Johnson? Commissioner Parker Moore, and then Richards.
TJ, you did mention both production in the city and implied city leadership to assure production in the region. You spoke of policies, programs, and principles.
Partnerships.
Partnership.
Principles of the big
Yeah. Could you say anything more about, to clarify that your, my understanding that your vision is more than just production in the city, that you are talking about the region and having the city engaged at that level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we really need to do to create a local food system, and people all over the country are figuring this out, is that you need to connect the urban eaters to the rural production areas. But at the same time, you need to recognize that you can have significant levels of production in the urban areas. Backyard gardens, community gardens, rooftop gardens, aquaponic systems. There's a variety of technologies and approaches where we could raise a whole lot more of the food right here in the city, but we'll never raise it all. So that's why we have to have strong partnerships with the larger farms that surround us, and why we need to work at a regional level.
TJ, I know you have lots of ideas about the urban ag. Have you seen comprehensive plans that have a separate chapter on urban ag, or is it usually some principles and goals scattered throughout the plan, the land use chapter, the environment chapter, and how would you suggest we would approach it? Having seen, I'm sure, some other comprehensive plans that address that issue.
Yeah, we being myself, the intern who was working with me in planning and development this spring, have looked broadly nationally at how other cities are doing this, and it's sort of all over the board. There are some included in various pieces of the comprehensive plan. There are some cities, most notably the city of Cleveland, that has an entire plan for urban agriculture and economic revitalization through their agricultural system. I personally think that for the city of Olympia, it would be best to have some general principles and vision statements that provide context, and then to weave in specific ideas into the various parts of the plan. For example, the issue of creating a vibrant sales from community gardens, backyard gardens, could be a portion of the economic development chapter. There might be other pieces that fit more into land use chapters, ensuring that we carve out appropriate space in the urban areas to ensure food production. So I think I'd go that route, overriding concepts, but then looking for opportunities within the existing chapters at this point.
Commissioner Richards, and then Commissioner McHale.
Hey TJ, thanks. Actually, when I was taking notes, I missed most of your last goal, 2020, 20%. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, so this idea came up here from one of the citizens came to that meeting. They said we ought to have a numeric target for how much of our food comes from our community. And so the idea, we played around with that night, just because it sounded good, but there's some logic to it, is 20% of all the food consumed in the city by the year 2020 comes from within 20 miles of the city, which would encompass all of Thurston County, portions of Lewis County, Pierce County, and Mason County. And I guess Grace Harbor County probably too.
Okay, one more. Okay. The second one is, one thing that we hear a lot is that the comp plan isn't prescriptive. It does set goals and policies that we can follow. How would you go about implementing those goals and policies around urban agriculture?
Well, I think that's the second step, and in some ways, having the delay on the code work this year might actually be a good thing if we get the comp plan in place, which gives us clear guidance for what those goals and policies should be. The comp plan is simply a vision, and I think my experience as a citizen and as a council member is you can always find something to either support or negate whatever your point is in the comprehensive plan. But I think if we're going to be serious about creating a healthy local food system and a robust urban agricultural program, step 2 comes after the plan is adopted and really putting those pieces in place, building the partnerships with community groups and citizens to realize that vision. Otherwise, it just remains a document on the shelf.
I know this is more in probably development regulations. I was just wondering if you have seen from looking at what other cities have done, anything in, say, building codes, any adjustments that have needed to be made to, with regard to the encouragement of, say, rooftop gardens or more, more for the urban area. In a lot of our neighborhoods, we have, grass that we can de-lawn and put gardens in, but if we're going to have dense housing, where it's probably rooftop that we need to consider. Have you seen anything about that in your reading so far?
Yeah, there's lots of examples. One quick one is the city of Seattle has added a height density bonus for rooftop greenhouses. So if you can have, say, a 4-story building, you can put a 5th story on it if it's a greenhouse designed for food production. So that's one example. Another thing that some cities are starting to look at is in the permitting of subdivisions, requiring land to be set aside. We do this already. We say you need to put so much aside for a park or whatever, to put land aside for community garden space. So there's lots of things that can be done. I think the challenge we have now is that those ideas can't make it through the sort of the technical permitting design process because we don't have clear language in the comprehensive plan that this is a goal that we as a community have.
Any other questions, Commissioner Berman?
I have a question. I don't know if you can answer this. I know because I sat on the Utility Advisory Committee and they submitted comments to the comp plan about building more sustainability across programs. And I wondered if you could link food to maybe some other examples of sustainability in the city that you might want to see included.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of food, is it connects to everything. And so it's really easy to think holistically when you start to think about a food system and all the things it touches. One of the ideas that came up at that meeting in May is why do we charge people the same rate for water if they're flushing it down the toilet or if they're growing food to feed their family or their neighborhood? So maybe we should be thinking about some way of having separate rates that would allow people to, using appropriate water-wise technologies, get a break on their water cost if that's being used in a way that we as a community like, which is to grow food for the community.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson? Thank you, TJ. Next person up on the list is Bill Chernoff. Mr. Chernoff?
Hello, my name is Michael King.
We're going to have you pull it real close to you, sir.
There we go. Thank you. My name is Bill Chernoff. I live at 1975 Cambridge Lane, Southwest. It's in the Kennewick area. We've got 98512. I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to express my opinions so comprehensive before us. Specifically, I've got some concerns about the provisions in the low-density housing section. That's in the draft edition. It's in the comprehensive plan update. It's in Appendix A, which is kind of towards the end of the table of contents there. Appendix A, future land use map designations. But when we look at the provisions for low-density housing, what we see in the opening line is that it's this designation I'm quoting here provides for low-density residential development, primarily single-family residential housing, detached housing. Then it goes on to say in densities ranging from 8 units per acre to 1 unit per 5 acres, depending on so on and so on. So that's my first concern is why would anybody consider 8 units per acre of low-density housing? As an example, you've got a 10-acre piece, you can put 80 housing units on it. That's going to get you about a 5,000 square foot lot. And then you take off the provisions for street access, utility